Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. 9 surahs that our beloved Prophet ﷺ used to read during the night. And many of these surahs, perhaps we know it's from his sunnah, but other ones, it's going to be the first time that many of us are going to hear about these surahs. It's a forgotten sunnah that many of us don't practice. And these surahs, we're going to divide them into 2 main categories. The first category are the surahs that you can read anytime during the night. And the second category are the surahs that he would read at specific times or with specific acts of worship during the night. The first category, there's 6 surahs. 6 surahs in the first category that you read anytime during the night. And they are Surah As-Sajda and Surah Al-Mulk and Surah Az-Zumar and Surah Al-Isra and Surah Al-Kafirun and Surah Al-Ikhlas. These are 6 surahs that he would read during the night, alayhi salatu wassalam. And the last 2, number 5 and 6, Surah Al-Kafirun and Surah Al-Ikhlas, these are also going to fall, as you're going to see, into the second category as well. In the Jami' of Imam al-Tirmidhi, from the hadith of Jabir radiyallahu an, he said that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam would not sleep at night until he read Surah As-Sajda and Surah Al-Mulk. Another hadith also in the Jami' of Imam al-Tirmidhi, the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu anha, that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam wouldn't sleep at night until he read Surah Az-Zumar and Surah Al-Isra. And this hadith, these 2 surahs, perhaps many of us have never heard of them before. Surah Al-Mulk, I think it's more famous, but this is a sunnah which has become a forgotten sunnah, reading Surah Al-Zumar and Surah Al-Isra. And the 5th hadith, or the 5th sunnah, or the 5th surah, it was Surah Al-Kafirun. And this came in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, that the Prophet ﷺ, he told the Sahabi to read Surah Al-Kafirun and to make sure that he would go to sleep after reading it. And he said it frees you from shirk, it frees you from polytheism. And he said ﷺ, and the other hadith with Surah Al-Ikhlas, this is the 6th surah, the 6th sunnah, that he said, is it something that you are incapable of? He's asking a Sahaba, he's sitting with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. He said, is one of you incapable of reading thuluth al-Qur'an, reading a third of the Qur'an in the night? And imagine that. We're looking at the Qur'an now, here 600 plus pages. Is it possible for us to read the entire, or a third of it, a third of the Qur'an in the night? It's very difficult. And that's why the Sahaba said, who can do that? And he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, that it equals, يَعْدِلُ, that it equals, or it's equivalent to a third of the Qur'an. And that's why the scholars said that if you were to read Surah Al-Ikhlas 3 times, you'll get the ajr as you read the entire Qur'an in the night. Now the question that we have to ask ourselves before we go to the second category, is this something that's difficult or not? If you look, for example, at Surah Al-Isra and Surah Al-Zumar, yes, this might be a bit more difficult because they're longer. So Surah Al-Isra is 111 verses, and it's 11 and a half pages. Surah Az-Zumar is 75 verses and it's 9 pages. So 11 plus 9, that's 20 pages. That means about 1 juzu. So 1 juzu, yes, that's going to take us some time. That's rather long. But if you look at the other ones, Surah Al-Mulk, 30 verses, it's a little over 2 pages, about 2 and a quarter. And if you look at Surah As-Sajda, it's also 30 verses and 3 pages. So those 2 surahs are only going to take us a couple of minutes to read. If you look at Surah Al-Kafirun, and I went before I came on, I said, let me just time it here on the iPhone and check out how long it takes. And I found that Surah Al-Kafirun, it took me 20, we're talking about proper recitation, tilawa, not a fast recitation, took me about 20 seconds to read. Surah Al-Ikhlas, for me to read it 3 times, it took me 30 seconds. So there's no excuse not to implement these sunnahs. They're very easy to implement when it comes to the last 4 surahs. The other 2, the longer ones, Surah Al-Zumar and Surah Al-Isra, it might be difficult to implement it every night, but at least we should implement this sunnah sometimes. And Imam Ahmed rahimahullah said, there's no sunnah that I learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam except that implemented it at least 1 time, to put it into action. So it's something we should do every now and then to revive this sunnah and to get this ajr inshallah ta'ala. 3 quick points to point out when it comes to the fiqh of reciting these surahs. First of all, in 5 of them, the first 5 we mentioned, other than Surah Al-Ikhlas, all of them were mentioned before sleeping. So yes, it's better to do it before sleeping, but it can be done anytime during the night. From after Salatul Isha onwards, even if you say after Salatul Maghrib, that's officially when the night starts, you could read those surahs anytime then, and you'll get the reward, inshallah ta'ala, of following this sunnah and the other rewards mentioned. For example, when you read Surah Al-Mulk, if you read it during this time, inshallah ta'ala. So this is the first thing. The second thing is, as we said, the better time is during the night. The second thing is that, but you can read it anytime during the night. So these are the first two things. The third thing is that if you were to have read it, for example, in Salatul Isha, or you put it into your night prayer, also it's going to count as being read during the night. But it's important to point out here on this third point is that you shouldn't make this, for example, every night in Salatul Isha, I'm going to read Surah Al-Sajdah and Surah Al-Mulk because it'll fall into the sunnah. Here, if you do it all of the time, you're going to fall into bid'ah, into innovation. So you need to refrain from that. But every now and then, let's say, for example, if I lead the prayer tonight and I read Surah Al-Mulk, then khalas, it's already counted. I've already done it. I wouldn't have to come and read it again. So that's what's meant by the third point. When it comes to the second category, the surahs that he will read at certain times or with certain acts of worship, there are 5 surahs. And they are Surah Al-A'la, Al-Kafirun, Surah Al-Ikhlas, or you can say the 3 quls, Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah Al-Falaq, and Surah Al-Nas. These are the 5 surahs that he would read at certain times or certain acts of worship. So we know from his Sunnah alayhi salatu wasalam in Salatul Witr that he would read in the first rak'ah with Surah Al-A'la. And the second rak'ah he would read alayhi salatu wasalam with Surah Al-Kafirun. And in the third rak'ah he would read with Surah Al-Ikhlas. So these 3 are done in Salatul Witr. When it comes to the al-mu'awwidhat, or the 3 quls, as we say, this is to be done before we go to sleep at night. This is a specific time. So you can't say any time during the night for these 3. No, because obviously Surah Al-Ikhlas, reading it 3 times, as we mentioned in the other hadith, you can do that anytime. But here, the sunnah of reading the 3 quls together is that you put your hands together, as it came in the hadith, and he would blow, not spitting, like blowing into the hands, and then he would read the 3 quls alayhi salatu wassalam. And he قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. He reads those 3s, and then he would wipe his body. As it came in the hadith, he would wipe his body what he could from his body. So he starting with the face and the head, and then whatever his hands can reach. So that doesn't mean you have to go down and get down to your feet and things like that now. No, whatever your hands can reach from the top, and from it's easy to reach from your body. This is the sunnah. We do that 3 times. We wipe the body, then we do it again, or 1 time. Then we read all 3 of them once, and then we do it again. So we're going to go through it 3 times. This is the sunnah before we sleep. There's also something I want to point out, and these are 9 surahs. I also want to add to that as a benefit different verses that he used to read alayhi salatu wasalam, and a hadith which is also narrated, but it's not authentic, with different surahs that he used to read alayhi salatu wasalam. When it comes to the ayat that he used to read alayhi salatu wasalam during the night, there are 3, and you can put them into 2 categories. And before he slept, and others when he would wake up during the night, or when he wake up from his sleep. So the first are Surah Ayatul Kursi, and the last 2 verses from Surah Al-Baqarah. So these are done before you sleep. This is sunnah to do these before you sleep. And the other sunnah is the last 10 verses from Surah Ali Imran. So you start from verse 191 to verse 200. These are the last 10 verses from Surah Ali Imran. It's been confirmed that he read these alayhi salatu wasalam when he woke up. There's another hadith about surahs that he would read during the night alayhi salatu wasalam, and it's also narrated in the Jami' of Imam al-Tirmidhi, where he would read al-Musabbihat. And what are the Musabbihat? I'll tell you in a minute, inshallah ta'ala. But what did the hadith say? First of all, that he would read al-Musabbihat before he slept, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he said that in these surahs, there's a verse, an ayah, which is afdal min alfi ayah, which is better than 1,000 verses. However, this hadith, it is not authentic. And al-Musabbihat, they are Surah Al-Hadid, Surah Al-Hashr, Surah Al-Saf, Surah Al-Jum'ah, and Surah Al-Taghabun. This is what's meant by these surahs. But this hadith, as we mentioned, are not authentic. But the other hadith we mentioned in the beginning about these 9 surahs and the verses as well, these are from the sunnahs that we need to revive and try to read during the night. The shorter ones, make sure it's every night, inshallah ta'ala, if you can. And the longer ones, like we said, do it every now and then to revive this sunnah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all from those who strive to implement the sunnah of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and increasing our reward for acting upon his sunnah alayhi salatu wassalam. Barakallahu fikum. Salam alaikum wa rahmatullah.